All right, everybody, welcome. Today we're going to be starting up a HTML project. We're going to be using CSS to go with it. In yesterday's class, we should have, or in the last class, we should have worked on our Hello World application. Pretty straightforward, nice little code along. And today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a web page for a local grocery store. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with opening this up. We'll talk about what HTML and CSS are kind of as we go. But I want to first, and I'm doing this on a Mac, we'll talk about some of the Windows commands in a bit. But I'll show you guys kind of what's going on here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my Finder. You don't necessarily have to do this. I'm going to be doing this so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to open my terminal. Now on Windows, opening my terminal. All right, we'll just open a new one this way. So put that there. All right. So right now I'm, this is a way that computers move from file to file. This is what's called a graphic user interface, right? So if you're using File Explorer on Windows or Finder on a Mac, this is a graphic way of doing the same thing that we're doing. This is just a way that it's all text-based. It's a little bit less obvious how to use things, but it's still pretty simple. We're going to work through it. Should be pretty well okay. Here we go. So right now, I'm looking at my user, right? Everything that's on this computer, Macs, obviously they've got the cloud-based stuff as well. It's not displaying right here. But what I'm going to do is my first thing I'm going to write in here is I'm going to do what's called CDing into something, right? So it's just CD, it stands for change directory, right? And a directory is just another name for a folder. So I'm going to change my folder into documents. Now I can write this much of it and press tab. And if that folder exists in the folder that I'm in, or that item exists in the folder that I'm in, I should be able to press tab and it will finish it for me, right? Now you don't have to save your files where I do. I do recommend that you make a specific folder for all of your coding temple projects, for all of the work that you're doing for this course. That way you know where it is, and you can stay a little bit more organized. So we're gonna be doing that. So I'm gonna move into my documents folder. I already have a folder set up for this, so obviously the names of things are gonna change for you guys just a little bit depending on where you want to put it. The way you make a folder here, so obviously on my graphic user interface, you should be able to make a new folder if you want to. You can use the shortcut there. That obviously will not work here, right? If I'm right clicking, can't make a folder. Right here, I can just click new folder. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna do mkdir, okay? And this is for Mac specifically. On Windows, making a folder is also mkdir. There you go. So it's the same one for Windows. So we're going to mkdir, and then we're going to put the name of our folder. Mine already exists, so I'm not going to execute this command, but you could make a coding temple folder, right? Self-paste folder. You could do that very easily. Whatever you want to name it, just make sure you know what it's called, right? And then you'll press enter, and it will make that folder. So actually, I am going to do this just to see this, okay? And you notice how it just made this folder right here on the GUI. So that's on Finder, and that should work with File Explorer too. You should be able to have, if you have them both up, you should be able to see that happening together in real time. Super neat, okay? Well, now we made it, but you can tell right here, this is where we currently are, is in Documents, right? So we're still in this folder. We're not inside of that new folder yet. Think about what you would use to go into a new folder, right? We've already used it once. You're going to CD into it. You're going to change directory into it. So you should be able to go CD coding, and notice that it doesn't, if I tab it, it stops because it doesn't know which one of these it's going to be. So if I add a character and tab again, now it knows, right? But if I go back and I do an underscore, now it will go to this folder, right? And that's not the one that we want right now. We want the self-paste. Again, you will probably have, different file names and folder names in here, but I recommend making a coding temple folder, okay? So you notice that this we call it the slug, the very end of our line of information, right? The end of it right there, it is now coding tempo self-paced. So that's the folder that I'm in. So it's as if, okay, as if I had clicked into this. You might be saying, well, if you're already in that, shouldn't that show here? Well, not necessarily, because I can also go someplace totally different on a different finder, right? And that's all that's happening here, right? It's just this application's at a certain location, this one's at a certain location, and we're just kind of following along. So what we're going to do today, we're going to make a directory, and we're going to call it coding fresh, right? Notice how it popped up right there. And then you should have VS Code installed already, but what we're going to do is we're going to type code, and then we're going to make a period. Now, code says, hey, this this folder that we're in, which right now is that coding tempo self-paced, we're going to open that in code, and we're going to open all the folders in it. Now, we got to stop for a second because we are not in our coding fresh folder. We made it, but we haven't gone in it yet. So one more time, we're going to cd into, that coding fresh folder. Now we're there, coding fresh. And we're going to type code. And we're going to open it, okay? And we should have VS Code pop up for us in a second here. Okay, it opened up on my other screen, so we got to move it. Okay, just got to wake up a second. Okay, do you trust the authors of the files in this folder? If you're getting this, just say yes, right? I hope you trust yourself to behave. All right. There's other CLI commands, right? The ones we're using today obviously are the CD, and then the path name, right? Change directory to whatever we're seeing, or make a directory. Be careful with a few of these, because if you end up in the wrong location, you can remove really important files from your computer. But those are the ones we're focusing on right now. The other one that's really nifty is ls on Mac or dir on Windows, and I'll show you guys what that does real quick. So I'm going to take a shortcut to go all the way back to the beginning. So actually on a Mac, this is, you can see that at the very beginning when I opened this, right, that's my whole computer, right? All of this stuff at the furthest back, the root of the whole thing, is that little squiggle. And so I said, hey, I want you to go back to the squiggle. I could also have said go back to documents, that kind of a thing. But the ls on Mac or the dir on Windows, if I put that and I just press enter, it will just tell me all of the folders and files that are inside of that folder, right? So if I go back to here, right, so now I'm at my user, and you'll, again, remember that these things are in there too. So if I go to documents, right, I open up my documents, here's all the options that I have. And so that's just the easy way to be able to see what your options are so that you don't get kind of lost, that sort of deal. Really nifty. All right, so we've opened up VS Code. You may recall that you can either create a file this way, or you can double click, or just click new file. I prefer double clicking just because it's quick. We're going to start out with an index.html, and we will open up an HTML file, right? Now notice that when we use that code dot command inside of that coding fresh folder, that wound up here, coding fresh. So we're inside that folder. Now from this folder, I can't access all the other files on my computer, right? And there's some ways around that to get things in and out. But the basic idea is that we are inside of a project, and we don't necessarily want to work on other projects from this project. We want to be focused on something that's inside of these parameters. So we're going to make our index.html, and we're going to double click again, and we're going to make index.css. And then we're going to make a folder, okay? So again, we've made files now. You could have done it this way too. But we're going to make a folder, and we're going to call it images, right? Because we're going to have some pictures on this, and they're going to be pretty cool. It's going to be nice. It's going to be nice. We'll get to some of that in the next lesson. We're going to focus on the HTML for this portion of video, and then the next video will include the CSS and images and styling it. But we're going to make sure that we've got our HTML figured out, and get this all straightened out for the time being. So once again, HTML is hypertext markup language, just as a reminder, okay? This is a displaying language. That's what the markup part means. We're not processing data. We're not changing data. We're just displaying things, right? We're marking it up. And again, the HTML at the end here and the CSS at the end tell VS Code and our browser what kind of files they are and how to run them. But we're going to start out, again, we're going to use that. It's called an Emmet abbreviation. In the very first line of our HTML, make sure you're on your HTML folder. I'll get rid of the Windows thing there. The very first line of your HTML folder, we're going to start with an exclamation mark, right? Okay, so the Emmet abbreviation for the exclamation mark, it's pretty neat when you click it or press enter or whatever. And I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'm on a pretty large screen. It gives us what's called boilerplate, right? And we saw this in the last lesson, that it automatically populates a bunch of information for us. It gives us a template, is another good way of thinking about it, where you have stuff that's already set and ready to go, and then you just get to populate it with the information that you want, okay? So this will load on your browser as it is. It won't display anything. The web page will be called document, but this is all of the kind of the background stuff we need to talk to the browser already set up for us. So we're going to need for pretty much every HTML file that we need. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to change this title to Coding Fresh, right? And you probably recall from our Hello World that, again, that talks to the browser and says the tab name at the very top of the web page. And we'll take care of that. We are also going to focus on the HTML first. So here's what we will do. We're going to start out in our body, because think about what the body part means, right? The head versus the body. The head is stuff we talk to the browser. That kind of goes on in the background, and the body is the stuff we actually want to display. We're going to start out with some H1 tags, right? So if you're on VS Code, you should be able to write H1 and then tab it, right? And that will automatically set up our opening and our closing tags. Remember, these things are like boxes, and now we're going to put information inside of our box, and the H1 is just the kind of box we have chosen. So Coding Fresh, that's going to be our main thing, and I want it to open up here. So I'm going to go to my web browser just to make sure that this is working, and I'm going to open, not that one, my index.html. This should just say Coding Fresh, just like that. How cool is that? And at the top it says Coding Fresh. That's the name of my page. That's what we wanted. So this is working so far. That's pretty cool. We're going to go back to VS Code. We're going to keep typing a little bit more of this stuff in. So we're going to do an H3 tag that says, welcome to our grocery store. And keep in mind, you can pause this video at any time, right? You can look at my code here. So that if you need to type along, that kind of deal, feel free. Go as slow as you want. This course is called self-paced for a reason. No need to rush. We're all good. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a P tag, right? And so again, H tags, the H1 through 6, and there's 6 of them. Okay, remember that, because if you try an H7, it won't display the way you want. There's only 6 different sizes. And then there's P tags, which are for like paragraph content. So I'm going to write P and tab that forward, okay? And then we're going to write a description. So, Coding Fresh is the best fresh grocery store in Townsville. Let's send that with exclamation mark. Let's be a little peppy, okay? Now, notice that I can do this too, as long as the little drop down isn't there. HTML doesn't really care about tabs or enter, right? So you can write stuff on a new line, and this will all display in one line on our website. And I'll tell you guys in a second how to not have that happen. But what we're going to have here, this will all display in one line. So we offer a wide selection of locally grown produce and organic products. Okay, and then it closes the P tag, right? So again, all that text is inside of this P box. And we're going to move on from there. How cool is that? All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a bunch of items in a list. Okay, so, all right, Brandon, how do we do a list here? Well, there's a couple different parts to it. So there's what are called unordered lists and ordered lists. And ordered lists are going to display like 1, 2, 3 or ABC, that kind of a thing, and then you'll have your content after that. We want unordered lists here, and we'll see what this can do in a second. So I'm going to have UL, okay, unordered list, and it's going to have bullet points with it by default, okay, and then in between we're going to have a bunch of list items, okay, and inside of this content we're going to have some stuff displayed, right? So we could have apples, we could have grapes, we could have kale, right? And so I'm going to head back over here and refresh my page. Okay, so that's what we have, right? So here's our, and actually we did this on, I think, the last video as well. But if you right click and you go to inspect, okay, whatever you've right clicked on will show up here, and you can actually see what your code is, and which is really useful for identifying and what we call targeting elements, right? So saying, hey, I want to change this element, but I've written 1,000 lines of code, right? We're not there yet, but you'll get there. Okay, I've written 1,000 lines of code, and I want to know which element this is and how do I edit it, right? And so it will show up here. You might have to drop it down, but you can see that this is the content, and you can actually change some of the stuff that's in there, right? It's a huge selection. And notice how that word changed, right? Now it says huge. Now if I refresh the page, right now it's displaying code from here, but if I refresh the page, it's still going to check this file for what that original information is. So we'll go back to wide selection the way that we want, and that's pretty straightforward, right? And this is, again, just raw HTML. This is just the way it is. Not styled. This is just the default way of displaying it. That's what I mean by that. All right. So back to our HTML. So we've got our 3 items here. And we'll go back and change these in a little bit. We're going to use some images to put those in there. But then after that, what if after our images, after our list, for right now, well, again, like I said, we're going to change those to images. So right after our list, I want to have a form, right? What if I want users to be able to write me messages, to give me input, give me some feedback, that kind of thing. Anytime that you want a user on your website to be able to type stuff in, right? Like the Google search bar is an input field. So we're going to make a form. But first I want to make like a title for the form, right? Have something at the top to display to say, hey, this is my form, right? Give users some direction. So I'm going to go with an H3 and tab it. And I'm going to say, contact us. Pretty straightforward, right? And then I want to have, we'll get to that in a bit. So then I'm going to put in a form, right? And form is another type of box. I don't need an action right now. That will come default, but we don't need that right this instant. We'll get there when we get there. So we're going to write a whole bunch of different labels for this, right? And we'll see what that looks like in a second. So labels and input. So the label is kind of what the name of the thing is. Again, we'll just make a pair and we'll have a look at this. So the first thing we're going to do is a label. And again, I don't need for anything just yet. I just need a label. And I'm going to say name. And then after that, I'm going to put a break because I want these to display vertically. Now, wow, what a weird box. It only has one side, right? That's not a box. That's correct. This is one that opens and closes itself. And all that this little BR thing does, it stands for break. And it just says, hey, HTML, just go to the next line, right? Just go to the next thing. Don't display these on the same line. Just keep things organized. I think HTML probably does that by default here. But I did want to show you that in case you come across it in your code. And so once we have that, we're going to go with our input. And this one, we need a couple of little attributes, right? So again, when we have our tags here, and inputs, I think, yeah, input is a self-closing one as well. So there's not going to be a second tag for like a closing kind of box situation. So you've got your element, your input type, and then we've got it's like an aspect. It's like a characteristic of our input. And we're going to need that. We're going to need that because we need to tell it what kind of input we want. There's a couple different types, and I'm going to show you a few different ones that we can do here. But this one, we want it to be text. We want users to be able to write some text in there. I'm going to give it the ID of name, and this will come back useful once we get to some CSS stuff. But then we're going to get to a placeholder. Oh, wow, what is that? That sounds fancy. What that's doing is if you've ever like gone to someplace like Google, right, where you're going to input text to an input box, you might see some content that's there before you type, but as soon as you start typing, it disappears, right? That's placeholder text. It's going to sit there and wait for users to start typing, and then it's going to disappear as soon as they start writing. So we're going to have name, and we're going to put 3 dots there, and it'll be real cute. All right. And we're going to add another break line there. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Got to refresh the page. Boom! How cool is that? I think I still have my little... you might be able to see this. Anyways, yeah, so there's name right there. And maybe if I just do like this. We got our name right there. We've got our input box right underneath it. And obviously, as soon as I start typing, it goes away. That's what we wanted. We're going to do this a few more times, right? So I'm just going to copy paste these 2 lines. We'll get 3 of those, okay? Instead of name, I want my user's email, right? I want to be able to reach back out to them. We still want it to be a type text. This time I'm going to change the ID to email. And the placeholder is also going to be email. And then last one, we're going to have a phone number in case we want to reach out to them by phone. And that'll work like that. Pretty neat. Now, I'm going to go over here and refresh. You should be able to see a couple more of them pop up over there. That'll be nice. And we're going to add a few more kinds. Okay, so again, so far we've only done a text kind of form input. Now we're going to add a text area one, which is a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to have a label tag. We don't need an attribute for it yet. We're just going to put message. Right, so if they're sending like an email to us through this form, a message to us through this form, we want them to be able to write more than like half a line of information, right? Like if it's a complex situation, you want them to be able to feel like they're heard and have it written out. So we're going to add a break statement there. And then we're going to do a text area. And this comes with some pretty nifty stuff already loaded in here. So the name of our text area is going to be message. The ID is going to also be message. The columns are going to be 40. We want it a little bit nice and wide, but we don't want it to be that long. So we're just going to go with 5. Okay. And then it has a closing tag for the text area, and we're going to put a break after that as well. Let's see what this looks like. Look at that. We got all the space over here. They can type all these things. Anything they want to type in there, right? Like I had a horrible customer experience and there were terrible groceries. Hopefully not. Hopefully you have good groceries. And again, when you refresh the page, it defaults to nothing. Now, obviously right now, this isn't going to work, right? You might be thinking, well, where are we going to send this information, right? Am I just going to get emails from random people saying Coding Fresh isn't even a real grocery store? No, because this only exists on your computer thus far, and we haven't tied this to any other stuff. There are ways of doing that. We'll get there down the road. For today, we're just practicing displaying things. Again, we're not trying to really do stuff with it yet. We just want to practice showing things on our page. So we'll go back to our code. We have a couple other parts of forms that we can put in here. I'm going to put another pair of p tags in here because I just want to have some writing in the middle of it. Excuse me. How would you like us to respond? Just like that. And then we have our closing tag. Okay. So again, then that shows up. And then we're going to do input type radio, and this will be interesting as well. I don't know why I said as what. Radio. ID equals email. Oops. We want it in quotations. You'll notice that all of these have a similar kind of format, that each attribute of something has a what is the attribute and then the kind of the value of that attribute for each item. So in this case, the ID, that's a pretty standard one. That's very common. And then you have some content of some sort. So you're basically giving it a specific identification. You don't want to reuse these, right? I would notice how they're all different. Every time I have ID in here, they're all different values, and it's because you want it, again, like an ID card, right? You want to be a very specific kind of a thing. You know, you can't share driver's licenses, for example. So each ID should be a unique value. And then our value is going to be email. Now let's see what this looks like just all by itself. Probably nothing. Yep. So there's our, look, I got a button. Woohoo! We'll see how that works in a second. And then we're going to have the label, and we want the label after it this time, right? So previously we had the label before, right? Label field, label field. Now we want the field followed by the label. It just kind of seems to be common convention, just how it kind of makes sense. Label for email. And then we're going to have, oops, one more, email written in there. Let's see what that looks like. There you go. So now you can select email. Right now we just have the one, so you don't have any other options. But we're going to copy paste lines 31 and 32 right there. And then obviously, like you're probably going, dude, you just said don't reuse IDs. We're going to change it. We're going to go to phone radio. For phone, I'm going to change this to phone. So now when I refresh one more time, there we go. Now you can pick one or the other. Not sure why that's not displaying for me, but oh, it's because I have my video recording stuff's in the way. Anyways, but yeah, so those will work. And then last of all, we're probably going to be like, you know what, let's have a submit button, right? And notice too that these things inside the form, they displayed on the same line. That email and phone are right next to each other. And that's why we had those break statements earlier to keep those things separate. And so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put one more break statement right here. And then on the next line, we're going to have a button that says submit, right? And so our users can put a whole bunch of data in here, right? And then ultimately they'll be able to submit. And that does things to our location, but don't worry about it too much. And the message is not actually sending to an email. But again, we're just practicing displaying things. And that is about what we have for our HTML. The next video, we're going to connect those images in there instead of these list items, and then we're going to style it, and it's going to look fabulous, and or at least pretty good, and we'll move forward from there. So, good seeing everybody. Nice little video here that I hope helped. And again, feel free to experiment with lots of this stuff. If you're confused about something, right, like what's an input field, what kinds of inputs are there, Google it. Look it up. YouTube's a great resource for this too, if you're looking for more depth on some of these things. Yeah, but there you go. There's your HTML for this project, and we'll have that saved, and we will see you again in the next video. Good to see you guys. See you for some styling up next.